Welcome to Ministries Toolbox. Today, got something special for you. I think it's going to be special just because we're probably the only thing you're going to be able to hear that isn't talking about the upcoming election. It just seems like everything that is going on right now is all about the election, which happens tomorrow at the time of this recording. So today I've got something special for you. We're going to be doing an interview with David B. Smith, and you'll find out why that might be of some interest to you. Back in a moment.
Welcome to Ministries Toolbox, providing leaders with the tools they need to succeed in ministry. Now, here's your host, Casey Sabella.
We're back, and before I introduce our guest, I just want to kind of give you a sense of my environment. I live here in Connecticut, and if you're not from Connecticut, you don't know anything about Connecticut, you might have various ideas of what this state is really all about. If you look at travel publications, you may see Connecticut, particularly in the fall. It's really a beautiful place to come. A lot of people will come across country just to see the leaves during the fall. And you see these ideas of leaves everywhere, covered bridges even in some cases. We do have one or two of those in our state. Beautiful landscapes and farms and that sort of thing. And that does represent a certain portion of Connecticut. But Connecticut is a pretty diverse place. To the south of me is what's called Fairfield County, and we call that the Gold Coast. And the reason we call it the Gold Coast is everyone down there is very rich. In fact, in order to get a house down in the Gold Coast right now, I think you can probably get a normal-sized house for about $750,000. Capes are going down there for about $500,000. And a normal house in Greenwich, for example, goes for a couple of $1 million. And it's sort of a different world than most other people in Connecticut. So if you have this one idea of what Connecticut is, I can tell you it's a very diverse type of state. Now, the Gold Coast stretches all the way from Greenwich and just keeps going up the coast, and all of that has beaches and all the rest of that. And then it comes to a city called Bridgeport. And Bridgeport is where the Gold Coast ends. I can tell you that in Bridgeport, you're not going to have to spend $500,000 for a house. You're not going to have to spend $1 million for a house. At one time called the murder capital of New England. It is a city that is troubled on a number of different ways. There's been corruption politically. There's been all kinds of things that have gone on. It's had really a lot of its challenges. It has an incredible history. It's got the history, I think, of Barnum and Bailey Circus comes from Bridgeport. But it's a city that's gone through a lot of difficulties, and it's trying to find its way to recovery. My next guest has a lot more information about Bridgeport because his life was intersected by this city. Dave Smith grew up in a home that was led by a pastor. His father is a pastor, his grandfather's a pastor, and I think it goes back about 300 or 400 years. Everyone's a pastor in that family. But Dave somehow missed out on that particular vocation when he was young. And I want to introduce him now. He's going to share with us how, first of all, that he didn't become a pastor, what happened, briefly his life journey, and how it got him to Bridgeport. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you. I appreciate this time, Casey. I do.
What was really the difference with you? I mean, you said you had brothers and sisters, or I'm not sure sisters, but who was really, what was the difference for you when you said, I'm not going to be a pastor, I'm going to go a different direction? Was there a certain turning point, or?
Well, yeah, there was a big turning point in my household. I hate to say that people in the public weren't the same as they were in private. And
don't tell me that's true.
And there was a lot of physical violence in my household.
Wow.
And I used to ask the Lord, because I had got saved at a young age, and I used to ask the Lord, why couldn't He protect His own? And I seen that discrepancy in my house, and I just couldn't get my arms around it, and I got angry at the Lord. and at the age of 16, I went the other way. I was angry at the Lord, and I continue to be angry at him for a good amount of time. About 15 years, I started using drugs and alcohol, and that whole lifestyle. I got addicted to crack cocaine.
Now, were you still living at home during this time, or did you?
Well, at this time, my parents kicked me out of my home around 15. I was on my own. I've been on my own since I was 15,
Wow.
and just making my way. And when I got a little older, around 18, a couple of times I found myself locked up. Well, more times than what I care to admit, and I just lived the life of a drug addict.
Now, did your parents completely divorce you, or did they, in the sense that they just say, you're on your own, and
Well, my father did. But my mother always was there. I tell the story that she used to come where I was at because it was in the same city. It was in Boston and Brockton, Massachusetts, and she would come to where I was at, and she would have a lunch for me. She would pray for me. Anytime I needed anything, she was there. Whenever I did get locked up. All the times there was not a week went by that she wasn't there. She wasn't praying for me. In fact, whenever I came back to the Lord, her and her church were on a 21-day fast for me, and unbeknownst to me, they were praying. And the day I came through, I remember I was on a 2 or 3 week binge, smoking crack. Hadn't been home. I have a sister. Her name is Michelle. She was my enabler.
Before you go any further, how did you? Of course, crack is a very expensive habit.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get the money?
I think how most people out there that don't have jobs or education does it. They break the law. They rob. They steal.
Gotcha.
Break into houses, cars. It's the lifestyle of a drug addict because you have to have crack. Once you cross that line of addiction, that drug, only thing I could describe it's the devil itself, I've done things that I wasn't raised to do, and I never thought I would do, and the things that I'm still ashamed of to this day. But thanks be to the mighty power of Jesus Christ. But
what was the turning point of you coming to Christ then? You said your mom was praying for you in the fast.
Yeah. Well, I didn't at that time. I didn't know my mom was praying for me. I was on a 2 week binge, and my sister Michelle. Again, she was my enabler, and after 2 weeks, I didn't have enough money for any more crack, and I didn't have enough energy. Literally, I stayed up 2 weeks in a row.
You said I'm sorry to interrupt again, but you said your sister was an enabler. What do you mean by that?
Well, anytime I needed anything, if I needed a place to stay, she was always there in my corner. She never turned me down, never shut a door on me. Even after I stole from her, she was just always there with me. She stood by me even when she shouldn't have,
Gotcha.
practically. And she was always there. So she had 4 children at the time. And after that 2 weeks, I came into their house, and I had my little niece. Her name is Kimberly, and she's about 34 now, 35. And she looked up to me and she says, Uncle David, can I draw you a bath? And that is the thing that turned me. My little niece that I loved so much, and she adored me. And I was smelling and I was looking that bad that this young girl, this little girl, kid at the time, wanted to help me. And she seen that I needed to bathe.
Wow.
And at that point, Casey, something changed. There was a window of opportunity. Right at that time, I dropped what I had. I had a 6-pack of B16s, Budweiser Talls, right? Because I was going to come down. And right at that, I called my mother and I told her that I was ready. I told her I was ready, and that's when she told me that they were on the final day of their 21-day fast. They were fasting for me.
Wow.
And that's when she said, "Are you really ready?" I says, "Yeah, Mom, come pick me up." Within 15 minutes, she came to pick me up, and they took me to Teen Challenge. Well, she took me to Teen Challenge in Brockton, Massachusetts. And because that area was my stomping ground, the director there at Teen Challenge at the time, which has passed away since then, he asked me if I would do anything. What would I do to stay clean? I said anything. And he sent me to Pivot Ministries in Connecticut.
Okay.
And so that's how I got to Connecticut. He sent me to Pivot Ministries in Connecticut. And I went to Pivot, and I did the program at Pivot.
So let me just interrupt here. Pivot is really sort of, Pivot is very much modeled after the Teen Challenge model. Pivot obviously is in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And for those of you who are not aware, I'm sure just about everybody is aware of Teen Challenge, but if you're not, you can read about David Wilkerson and his ministry in New York City, which opened that whole program way back in the 50s of the last century, and the results that they had with leading people out of drug addiction, that sort of thing. So they established Pivot in Bridgeport, which is how you got connected, and then you went there and went through the program.
Mm-hmm.
And when you came out of the program, obviously you were doing pretty well after the program was over. So what happened at that point?
Well, when I got out of the program, I spent 2 years in Pivot, between Pivot and Teen Challenge. Once you do a year at Pivot, it's the induction part. Then we would go up to Teen Challenge for an additional year up in the mountain at Raresburg. And then we would come back. And
And that's in New York?
No, that's in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Okay. And when I came back, I volunteered at Pivot for 6 months. And the founder of Pivot, which was from the first class from David Wilkerson, the first class up in Raresburg, he founded Pivot. He told me, "David, you shouldn't be here. You need to go home. You need to start your life." And literally, he pushed me out the door. And I went back home, and it was the hardest year of my life because it was the first time being clean, and I didn't have that support system as Pivot around me. And I struggled. I stayed clean. I struggled. I got a home church. I stayed close to my mom's, and I stayed clean, but I knew I had a calling on my life. And I knew because of my background that I had to do something such as go to school, and so that people could recognize my calling. So when I walked in the door, they wouldn't see me as just another crack addict or somebody just in recovery. And what I did was I went to school. Mm-hmm. I went to Elam Bible College up in Rochester, and I graduated from there. And from there, I got my first job in ministry. I worked for Youth for Christ as program director of Urban Ministries. And then from there, I got a job at Teen Challenge, and I worked at Teen Challenge for 4 years as the program director at Teen Challenge in Rochester. And then a door opened at Pivot. My spiritual father, the founder of Pivot, was retiring. And the president of the board at that time, his name was Bernie Grafsky. He knew how close I was with Pastor Smalls. I would have him up twice a year up to Rochester, and I love him. He accepted me for who I was, and he asked me to come down and speak at his retirement party, and I did that. And then after it, him and the treasurer of the board, they said, "Hey, David, have you thought about throwing your name in a hat for the executive director position? We're doing a search now." And I hadn't thought of it until that time, and I did. And that was in October of 2000. And in January of 2001, they offered me the position of executive director over at Pivot Ministries in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And that's what really started my passion for Bridgeport. It really started my passion for that area of the east side of Bridgeport, which Pivot Ministry resides.
I think we're going to break into the interview right here because it went on a lot longer than I had anticipated, and we covered a lot more than I think one show would do justice to. I think his testimony really should be just one show, and then next week we'll talk about how churches can partner with other ministries in ways that will have a legitimate benefit to their own members. We'll talk about that, and I think you're going to find it fascinating. But anyway, if you want more information about how to contact David, if you're in the Bridgeport area specifically, or if you'd like to help them financially, you can get his information by going to ministerstoolbox.com, and there in the show notes I'll have the link to his website and the contact information for him. Before we go today, you know that I always end each show with a quote, and this one comes from Casey Sabella, whoever he is. And as I was reading Ezekiel the other day, these words came to me. I'm not going to say that they were from God, but something really occurred to me that is kind of common sense, and it's about grace. And the thought that came to me is this: grace becomes a disgrace if it doesn't produce a changed life. Grace becomes a disgrace if it doesn't produce a changed life. And that occurred to me as I was reading Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 12, if you like the biblical reference. And if you'd like to use that and claim it for yourself, that's okay too. I don't have any copyrights on it. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up with you next week. God bless you.
For more resources, go to ministerstoolbox.com. Thanks for listening.